No one is talking about this as we have multiple big Leafs updates to go over today surrounding a couple of key players, including one following some new updates that have dropped that has fans fired up. We'll break that down as well as discuss recent acquisition, Henry Thrun. He spoke out on joining the Leafs and had some very interesting things to say. But before you know it all, folks, if you're a part of the percentage who aren't subscribed to the channel, this is the place to be for daily Leafs content. So make sure to hit that subscribe button. You guys have been absolute beasts with the support lately if you're enjoying. Ladies and gentlemen, a lot to go over today. And obviously, the Leafs are in it's an interesting spot right now surrounding the NHL. Moves are still going to be coming for the Leafs. They have to add a top six forward. But in the meantime, we have some comments coming out from recent acquisitions and, of course, something on Easton Cowan. But let's start with Easton Cowan, and then we'll dive into some of the comments from Henry Thrun later today. So a top 100 drafted NHL prospects ranking has dropped, and Darius, I feel like no one is talking about Easton Cowan right now as it pertains to actually making an impact on the NHL roster next season. And that's something that is a huge conversation point. And he was ranked number 48 out of the 100 prospects, which is very, very intriguing. He has kind of soared up the rankings, especially compared to where he was when he initially got drafted. And I think it's time that people start talking about Easton Cowan because he came out surrounding the upcoming season and said there's a job up for grabs and I'm willing to work for it. You pair that with a lot of scouts now and analysts, reporters saying that he could really make an impact on this Leafs team going forward. Makes things very interesting.
Yeah, there's a couple spots I think right now up for grabs, so he's not wrong in saying that. It just depends, where he ends up in the lineup, if he ends up in the lineup. And I do truly believe that this is a guy that could play in the NHL this coming season. I think that he's learned everything that he's going to in junior hockey. I would argue that even going back to last season that, there's that weird rule that they're actually getting rid of in the CHL where 19-year-olds have to go back and have to report for that extra season after the season that they were drafted. So he had to do that last year. It was a successful one, right? There was one thing left to do and he ended up doing that. He won the championship already. Then they won the championship again, the OHL, the J. Ross Robertson, that is. And then, of course, went on to actually winning the Memorial Cup this year. So he's done everything that he needs to at junior hockey. Could he play in the NHL or the AHL, I should say? Yeah, that's where he's going to end up if he doesn't make the NHL. But for me, the only thing with the entire organization, I think, heading into camp, and I was saying it even last year, they are going to make it very difficult for Easton Cowan to make the team out of camp on purpose to see if he can rise above that, fight against adversity, all of those things. And if he is able to do that, which he wasn't last year, he clearly wasn't. And again, I don't think it's necessarily his fault. They did it on purpose. Then he will, find a spot on this team. Again, he's ranked very highly. A lot of people think very highly of him, considering where he was ranked, draft night of his draft, wasn't supposed to be a first rounder. All of these things, he's turned out to be a great prospect. And I think that his game will translate to the NHL level. It's just a matter of when. So I think they're going to make it very difficult for him to make the NHL. I have to be honest. Rube, Treliving, all of that. They're going to sign PTOs. We saw it last year. And there's going to be a bunch of guys in camp and they're going to say, let the best man win and take that spot. So there is a world where I can see him on the third line, but man, he's going to have to outplay a lot of guys come training camp.
And obviously being ranked 48 is pretty impressive, especially with the amount of good prospects there is here. And you can see people are starting to kind of take notice of the fact that there is holes in this lineup. There's no reason Easton Cowan can't have an impact similar to what we saw with Seth Jarvis early on with the Canes, similar situation. All I'm saying is don't go dealing Cowan just yet. Give him a minute to start the season, folks. And of course, the Leafs do need to make a move for a top six forward. They probably will do so. But surrounding Easton Cowan, I'm sure you could factor into the bottom six, which is somewhere that we would assume he would be. Of course, he's not a center. He is a winger. And for a guy who, with the Toronto Maple Leafs, at least with the Leafs will be playing, you assume wing, it makes things very interesting. They traded away Fraser Minton recently. They obviously got rid of, and they still have their key prospects. You mentioned Ben Danford, and of course, there's also, Easton Cowan's the main one. Some of the other guys they had to trade away at the trade deadline makes things and the conversation in general interesting, especially because he's clearly eager to get the job. There's been rumblings about making trades for other guys like Nazem Kadri and things like that, but having a bottom six, which still has a couple slots open, assuming they get rid of Calle Yarncroke and David Kemp, I think I'd rather see Easton Cowan out there at this point than a guy like, Calle Yarncroke. Not necessarily saying he's a better player right now, which I do think actually Easton Cowan is, but he has the upside of being able to, realistically, most likely outcome, they'll probably start him in the AHL for a little bit, but there's a real world he breaks camp like Fraser Minton did, and then from there, he'll have the opportunity to earn himself a role, and if not, we'll send him down.
Yeah, and I'm a big believer. I mean, we can look at the lineup, and there's a lot of guys that are solidified. And I'm not saying, Bobby McMahon is going to get traded or anything when I say this, but I am a big believer that when you come into camp, if you do rise above, like I was just saying, earlier, and you do outplay a lot of the guys that, they'll make room for you. They will trade guys, even if they just, signed a guy, anything like that, they will make room for you if they think that you're going to make a difference for this team. So we saw that, there's flashes in Bobby McMahon's game, for example, where he looks great. He can score goals. He's, very physical. We know he's a great skater, but then there's times where he goes away for like 2 months, right? So if they see, okay, Easton Cowan looks like he's actually going to make a difference more often than a guy like Bobby McMahon, then a slot does open up on the left wing there on the third line, right? Obviously, Nick Robertson filed for salary arbitration. That's still up in the air. Are they going to even keep him? I think it's very likely that they will at this point. I have to be honest, but still, we saw it last year. They had a bunch of guys as scratches who came in, and they had extra guys waiting in the weeds every single night. So it's going to be interesting to see what ends up happening. But he can go down to the AHL now, which I think is good. He can continue to develop and progress at the pro level at least. So that's exciting, I think. But there is a real world where he does make a difference. He comes into the camp, into the training camp, surprises a lot of guys and fans, and does end up making the team. Because I think that at this point, when you look at the bottom six, they didn't perform that well last year. There was a lot left to be desired from a guy like Bobby McMahon. I wonder if, the coaching staff is looking at it like, hey, if he comes in and he looks good, he's going to get that spot.
Yeah, let us know down below your thoughts on that. Do you want to see him make the team, or do you want to see him used as a trade chip? But speaking of trades, there are some interesting things that came out as Henry Thrun, recent acquisition for Ryan Reeves, came out today and spoke out about the Leafs and joining the Leafs. And he said that he hates to say it, but he was a Bruins fan growing up. And I'm very curious to see how Henry Thrun actually plays into the Toronto Maple Leafs structure and team this year. Again, he was a Bruins fan growing up. He's only 24 years old. His favorite player was Zdeno Chara, and he'll be wearing number 3 with the Toronto Maple Leafs. And he was watching Top Gun when he was traded. So seems like an interesting player. And he once said that he wants to become a number 1 defenseman in the NHL. So clearly for the Leafs, they see upside here. Whether or not he's going to get to play a lot with the Leafs, again, it's up in the air. Maybe they move on from a defenseman. Maybe they find a way. I mean, Philippe Myers still got a handful of games last year, a good amount of games actually, because of the injuries. Maybe Henry Thrun takes over that role. Both pretty big guys. I'm excited to see him play, and I think that, again, the more that this trade lingers on, the more it makes sense for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and even to a degree for the San Jose Sharks, but seems like a pretty good kid, and good character as well.
Well, first of all, most important, good choice in movie there. But I think in terms of the player and what he can bring to the Leafs organization this year, it's pretty interesting. I think he was really thrown into the fire with the San Jose Sharks, like into the NHL right away. And that's why he hasn't necessarily, found success at the NHL level thus far. Again, he's still very young, of course. And it wasn't a great team that he was playing on, but he's going to come in. I don't think he has a spot on the NHL team for the Leafs, right? But he's going to come in, play in the AHL. They're going to continue to develop him into a guy who can be an everyday NHLer. And on top of that, this is a guy with NHL experience. And if there is any injuries, like you just brought up, he can come in and play in the NHL, and he has the experience to do it, right? So I think it's a very clever move for the organization where you move out some salary cap space, you bury most of his, cap in the minors for the majority of the season. And if there are injuries along the way, you got a guy who's young, hungry to make an impact, and has experience at the NHL level. It just makes a ton of sense heading into this season. And I don't know if I would prefer him over Philippe Meyer at this point. Again, different handed shots, all of these things, but this is a guy that I think is hungry to make an impact. And in terms of him growing up a Bruins fan, obviously don't love that. But, if because of his age, he was growing up when the Bruins were a pretty good team and doing things to the Leafs. So maybe he's learned a thing or two, which would be nice to bring to the Toronto Maple Leafs. So I think it was a clever move, and I think he will probably actually play a role for the Leafs this year. It just won't be every night.
Yeah, pending RFA. So if he has a good year somehow and with the Leafs, they can, of course, extend him if that comes up. But let us know down below what your thoughts are on Henry Thrun, and also, of course, the big impact that Easton Cowan is hoping to have on the Leafs. Thank you guys for watching. You guys are beasts. See you later.